This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, writer-director Andy Tennant, has directed some of the most successful romantic comedy features of all time, including Hitch, starring Will Smith and Kevin James, Sweet Home Alabama, starring Reese Witherspoon and Josh Lucas, and prior to that, Andy co-wrote and directed the romantic fable Ever After, starring Drew Barrymore and Anjelica Huston, and he directed the epic drama Anna and the King, starring Jodie Foster and Chow Fat. His last two action comedies, Fool's Gold, starring Matthew McConaughey and Kate Hudson, which he also co-wrote, and The Bounty Hunter, starring Jennifer Aniston and Gerard Butler, brought his total worldwide box office over the $1 billion mark. For the last 2 years, Andy's been directing and producing Chuck Lorre's hit Netflix comedy, The Kominsky Method, starring Michael Douglas and Alan Arkin. His latest feature, The Secret, based on Rhonda Byrne's international bestseller, stars Katie Holmes and Josh Lucas and will hit theaters in February 2020. A native of Chicago, Andy studied theater at USC, where he and I happened to be students at the same time, and we worked together on several shows. Andy's first job in the movies was as a dancer in the blockbuster musical Grease, before he eventually went on to direct such hit television shows as The Wonder Years and Sliders. So for me, this is a truly great thrill and a deep honor to have as my guest on StoryBeat today my friend, the exceptionally talented Andy Tennant. Andy, welcome to the show.
Oh dear, that's quite an intro. But thank you for inviting me.
It's the pleasure's all mine, believe me. So, all right, where did all of this begin for you? We're going all the way back to when you were a boy. What was the thing or things that led you to pursue life as a performer and then writer and director? What brought you into this?
Well, I think my parents were real moviegoers.
Yeah.
I mean, they loved movies, and I remember my father sitting me down to watch Casablanca when I was probably 12, and seeing movies like Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago. It was just a big part of our social fabric. And then I think when I went to USC, I was interested in film, but it was scary, and I loved theater. I loved performing. But I don't know if you knew this about me, but I was a pre-med major at USC.
Seriously?
Yeah, I didn't change my major to theater until my junior year, because my parents actually sat me down and they said, you don't want to be a veterinarian. I was like, well, but all my friends back in Illinois were either going to be doctors or lawyers. And I think I was a bit embarrassed at the time that I really loved movies and theater. Mm-hmm. But my parents actually are the ones who talked me out of going into med school.
That's the
wrong... following my dreams.
That's the wrong way around, isn't it? Normally parents are trying to talk their kids into being doctors and lawyers.
No, exactly. I mean, they did lots of things wrong, but that was the one thing they did right.
Well, they clearly knew something about you that maybe you didn't even know. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I had no confidence at all in A, my ability, or B, my tenacity.
Well, that's really interesting because, believe it or not, Andy, I remember you as being one of the most confident people I ever knew.
See, I think I've fooled a lot of people over the years.
Well, you've done a good job at it. Guess what? So have I. So we're in the same boat.
Yeah.
So the moving images, the movie part of it, where did you get your training? Obviously at USC you were trained in the theater like I was. Where did you learn how to
Yes, I'm actually very grateful that I have a degree in theater and not cinema, because I think there is a tendency for cinema graduates. They only think in terms of movie, and they don't have a kind of an underlying kind of understanding and appreciation of what actors do and the material and the written word. And I feel like John Blankenship, who was our professor at SC, taught me more about, I think, the human condition than anyone else. And I have found on sets with some of the, frankly, the biggest stars in the world, that I actually can talk the talk when it comes to their performance, and I'm not intimidated by talking about acting and performing and subtext and all the things that we learned in the theater that they don't teach in cinema.
There are very few people I've bumped into in life that were like John Blankenship. That is for sure. And
that is true.
And he influenced, for better and worse, some of the better performers that have been out there. And so, yeah, I think you're correct, that the theater training is probably more important than the cinema training. But where did you learn how to make movies then? Because you didn't get it while you were in the theater department.
No, I think what happened was when I was a dancer in Greece, I found myself far more interested in what the crew was doing than what the other dancers and actors were doing, which was waiting around. And I found myself really more intrigued and more impressed, I guess, with how things were made. And so I think it was in '88. There was a writer's strike. I had kind of made some money as a screenwriter, and then there was a writer's strike, and I decided to take that money and make my own movie, my own short film. And that to me was, I went to school on my own nickel, and made tremendous mistakes, but also kind of learned as I went.
Right.
And I made a short film.
You're expressing something that I've heard repeatedly on this show, which is that one of the best ways to make a career happen is to actually do it yourself, to actually do something, not wait around for someone else to give you the chance.
Well, especially now with iPhones and the fact that you can make your own film with it. I mean, back in the day, my short film cost $100,000. It was the heaven's gate of short films. And now, I mean, I would say now you can make a film with your camera, with your phone, and edit it on your computer, and it would be better than the film I made.
That's a matter of taste. But the question is, can you take that and make something good out of it? Is the question, and that is the hard part, isn't it? Making something that's story. Yep.
I mean, it ultimately took me about 2 years of thinking about, I wanted to make a short film, what that film would be, and why that was the only film that I could make, and it would be the only project that I truly was the sole author of. Nobody else would be making what I made.
Right.
And it spoke to me as a writer, as a director, and as what my taste level was, and who I was as a filmmaker.
Was it a comedy?
It was kind of a Mark Twain story called The Cat Story, and it was based on a family story that took place in the 30s, and it had two 12-year-old boys and a cat and an old town, and it was sort of a comedy. It was very much Mark Twain, and I felt like I'm from the Midwest, not terribly sophisticated, but I knew this story, and it was funny, and it had a kind of an emotional punch at the end, and so that's what I made.
And that then got you your first directing gig?
Yeah, because what happened was I made the film, and basically I did everything that I was not supposed to do. It was a period piece. It had kids, and you were working with animals, and it was like the trifecta of problems. But when it was done, I had it screened at it got screened at Universal, and I got the Wonder Years off of that because I could work with kids, and I got my first feature writing directing deal at Universal based on that short film.
Wow, that's very impressive. And we hear about occasionally somebody, even as you say, with their iPhone movie, somebody that happens for, but it doesn't happen every day. Now we've got YouTube, and all those films are out there, so people can see them quite readily.
And I think some of it you can get very technical and it can be all cutty and flashy, but at the end of the day, it's about the story.
Mm-hmm. I tell our students all the time, there is no better special effect in movies than a good story.
Well, you're right about that.
I think so. Obviously there are some pretty effects out there, but there's nothing that will appeal to an audience better than story. And we're going to talk more about that as we get deeper into this conversation. Let's go through a bit of some of your process. So you have been both a writer and a director for this entire time, and you don't always write what you direct, but I assume that you work on the script as you go, correct?
Well, actually, I have written with my writing partner, sometimes Rick Parks.
Mm-hmm.
We've written everything that I've made, except for The Bounty Hunter.
Okay.
So even though we haven't gotten credit, ultimately my niche in this business was taking a really good idea and a lousy script and rewriting it completely,
mm-hmm.
and then going and getting an actor and making that film. I did it on Ever After, I did it on Hitch, I did it on Sweet Home Alabama, I did it on Fool's Gold, I did it on Anna.
But it starts with that underlying story that attracted you in the first place, yeah?
Yeah, and a lot of times you read a script and it's really not very good. In fact, Sweet Home Alabama, the original script was unreadable, but it had a great idea. And I think often what happens is you get attracted to the not only the idea but the underlying themes,
mm-hmm.
and it may resonate in your life somehow, and you take that on board. When I did Ever After was not a very good script, but Rick and I had both just had daughters. And here were these two middle-aged guys being asked to redesign Cinderella for this generation, and we thought, well, wait, we just had girls. What kind of story would we want our daughters to see? And that happened throughout my career on various projects.
Would you say most of your movies have in some way been related to your own life's experiences?
Oh, yeah. A lot of what I've done is it's semi-autobiographical. Things were going on. I've done divorce comedies when I was having trouble in my marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Giving advice to younger friends of mine who were out in the dating world during Hitch. All of those things. You got to bring something personal to it.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really made a movie that I don't have something in it that speaks to me personally.
So that's important to you. I know there are directors that are far more mercenary than that, where they're just taking a job to take the job. But it has to have some personal connection for you.
Well, for me it does, because it's a year and a half of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I've read good scripts, I've read bad scripts with good ideas, but a lot of times listen, I don't have the career where I can just pick and choose anything I want.
Right.
The things that come to me, unfortunately, now are romantic comedies, and I feel like I've done that. I've said all I need to say about certain things, and yet the movies that I covet and the ones that I haven't gotten often are movies that I would stretch to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of the luck of the draw.
All right, so let's go through what happens once you've received a script, whether you think it's good, bad, or indifferent, and you decide this is something you want to spend a year and a half of your life on. Is the first step to, I assume aside from somehow optioning it or getting involved in it, that you then start to work on the script itself before you go out to an actor, correct? Or are they frequently attached?
Yeah. No. Well, it depends. on some movies, like on Hitch, Will Smith came to me after a director that they had, a very talented director, fell out, and I got the script, and it wasn't terribly good, but it had a great idea, and I went in to meet with Will, and we, it was supposed to be like a 45-minute meeting, and it ended up being 4.5 hours.
Wow.
Of just debating certain truths about dating and the whole relationships and stuff like that. And I think that was, and then from there, I got the job. Rick and I did a rewrite. We brought in other writers. I went back to it. It's just they're all different. But, and frankly, I have to audition like anybody else. I get a script, but I'm not the only one who gets a script normally. It's like I'm on the short list of 5 or 10 other directors, and producers will meet with all those directors and hear what they have to say about the script and how they would fix it or what they would do or how they'd shape it. And they pick the person, the man or woman who, I guess probably aligns more with what they think is wrong with the material.
Sure.
You sort of develop it together.
So the very, very first step then is to figure out how to put your slant on it so you can pitch that to a producer.
Yeah, and I don't think it's really not about how figuring it out. It's just what is my reaction, and because the thing that you can't do is go in and sort of blag your way through what you think they want or what you think they want to hear, because ultimately you have to make that movie. And having been in director jail twice, you're going to go down with the ship if it no one gets blamed except the director.
Explain for the listeners what director jail is.
Director jail is when you make a movie that either doesn't do well financially or doesn't do well critically, and you become toxic and no one will hire you, and you end up in director jail.
And you've had that twice.
Until you can dig your way out.
Right. And is there a particular thing that you've gone through in which you were able to dig your way out, and that's a way to do it?
Oh, yeah. No, I went to director jail after Anna and the King, even though I got nominated for a couple of Academy Awards and stuff, but it did not do well. And I went to jail. I went to director jail for a couple of years. In fact, I got Sweet Home Alabama after Anna and the King. Sweet Home had been a script that had been around for a long time, and it had come my way after I did Fools Rush In with Matthew Perry and Salma Hayek.
Right.
And at the time, I read it, I was just like, this is awful. It's terrible. And I passed. And so, 2 years later, almost 3 years later, it comes around again. And I'm, I don't have a job. I can't get a job. I have little kids, and I read it again, and I went and had a meeting. And in that meeting, they asked me what I would do to fix the script. I said, throw it out and start over. And I said the key for me, which was, I think, the one kind of signature thing about the movie that makes it hold up even today, is I said, my wife dated some great guys, and I dated some amazing women, but I didn't marry them. But they're not all idiots, and they're not all, awful people. I said, so why don't we do a romantic triangle where the decision is the choice between the right guy and a great guy, because that to me is a photo finish. But it also says that if Reese Witherspoon is going to be engaged to a moron, that makes her an idiot.
Yes, for sure.
And they were like, yeah, you're right, that's great, and go do it. So Rick and I went off and rewrote the movie, went down to Alabama on a field trip and rewrote the movie.
So that
and then ironically, I then had lunch with Reese Witherspoon,
right,
which had nothing to do with Sweet Home Alabama. I had done a movie with her when she was 15.
Oh.
I'd done a TV movie with her.
Which one?
And It was called what was it called? Desperate Choices.
Okay.
And it was Reese right after she had done Man in the Moon, and she was 15, and I was engaged, and we had a lovely time. And then she went off to Africa to make a film, and then we just kept in touch. And she would call me from various sets, and we would check in and things, and we just were sort of pals. And so we would have lunch every maybe 6 months, every year and a half, whatever. And we had lunch in West Hollywood, and I said, she said, so what are you up to? And I said, oh, I just wrote this script called Sweet Home Alabama. It's never going to get made. And I said, what are you up to? And she said, oh, I just made a movie nobody's going to go see. And that movie came out 3 months later, and it was Legally Blonde. And then the studio called me, Disney called me, and said, what do you think of Reese Witherspoon? Because her movie opened $20 million. And I said, I've known Reese for 10 years. And they said, well, can we make an offer to her? So like a half hour later, Reese called and said, I just got your script, and I'm going to read it right now. And then like the next day, she signed on.
Wow. That it's interesting.
That got me out of director jail.
Out of jail. It's interesting how you can go for 2 years and can't get anything, and then it happens in a smash like that, just a snap. I think.
Well, yeah, and it was. I mean, the script was. We had done well with the script. I come from a small town. Rick comes from a small town. We had we created the Candice Bergen character and all of it. It was just kind of really fun. It just turned out really well.
Well, I don't know that I've seen every one of your movies, but I've seen most of them, and I can say that one of the hallmarks of your movies is that they're very well structured, and they always have heart and passion, and they leave you at the end feeling like you got a really good, satisfying story. That's the hallmark of your work.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. By the way, the story of the good guy and the better guy, that hack writer Leo Tolstoy once famously said that the best stories come from good versus good, and that's what you had. That's what you had.
That's exactly right.
And they are, because then the conflict is that much more painful to the audience. And
yeah, it's just not the easy way, and development can be just heartbreaking and frustrating, and so you need to have I think what people, ultimate producers and studios ultimately look for is a strong point of view that can be backed up, and you have to. That's why you just can't fake it. You've got to go in. If you don't like the script, you don't like the script. And then if you say, this is why I don't like the script, but this is what I would do because I like her, or I like him, or I love the idea, but,
It's all about, as we've already said a million times, it's all about that story working. Without it, you're doomed. Do you, when you get a script, when you get something like that and it's not right, is the first thing you tend to think about story or character?
I tend to think about theme. I tend to think of what is it trying to say. I think that to me is because that ultimately is your kind of North Star on every scene in the screenplay.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, when you start cutting scenes because of the budget or because of your scheduling or any number of things, you always have to think about, it could be a great scene, but is it absolutely necessary to tell the story? And sometimes they're not, and a lot of times it's all about just what are you ultimately saying.
And that's what you work toward as you're rewriting the script or writing it from scratch.
I think so. I'm not always successful, but I do. I read. I'm reading a script now that's for a movie that I've read about 40 pages, and I'm just like, oh God, But I'm going to finish it because there is something in it that might be something that I'm interested in.
So it seems
I don't know yet.
It seems like what you're then particularly good at is figuring out what those themes are when you read a script, and then taking that and transforming it into a story that has all of the elements we talked about, heart and passion and all those things. That has to, clearly has to be one of your
you
talents.
got to find the beating heart to the story,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't get this old without living, and so for me, I've got 4 kids, I've got daughters, I've got sons, I've got, it's just like there's a lot that can be said that doesn't have to be trivial. It can still be funny and it can still be heartwarming, but I tend to want to make movies that aren't terribly dark. I mean, I enjoy going to thrillers and all kinds of films, but that's just not ultimately what people are going to pay me for to make.
No, you're a I would say you're definitely a lighter touch. You're certainly not known for dark movies. That's for sure.
No, I'm not David Fincher, although there are days that I wish I was. But
well, there are days that we all wish we were, but that's another story.
Yes, it is.
He spent a couple of years here in Pittsburgh directing and producing Mindhunter, and he has he's clearly one of the great directors of our time, but he also has a fairly dark reputation as a person. That's all over the film community here. And that's not you. I can't picture you being a dark person.
No.
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 So you're reading scripts and you're getting them, then they're not good, but maybe there's something in them. What's the biggest pet peeve that you have about new screenplays? Is it that they just don't have a thematic connection all the way through? Is that the typical problem?
They're just lazy writing.
So
as a writer and a director, I get frustrated and angry at lazy writing because I sweat, and Rick and I, when we're together, I mean, we struggle over every word, every phrase, every piece of dialogue, every description. Where is this going? Why? How, what's the ending? It's not good enough. Our first draft is probably 12 to 14 drafts.
Yep, I understand.
And it's and our first attempts and our 10th attempts are crap sometimes. I mean, they're terrible, or they're pretentious, or they're not funny, or they're not whatever. That process to me is so frustrating that I can't wait to get on a set, because writing to me is just dreary. It's
hard.
So frustrating. And then it's hard. And then but then when it's done, I actually feel as satisfied as when I finally see one of my movies when all of it's put together, when everything's finally done. But the process is the process.
Is that the ultimate best thing in the world, is to finally see the finished product?
Yeah, I have a little tradition of when everything's finally done, and I mean everything, I like to just watch the movie by myself in a screening room, and because then I can say goodbye to it, because after that it's no longer mine. It becomes it's another thing. It's a product, and other people can trash it or love it or not love it or have an opinion about it, and it's all done. So at the end, and usually it is. It's about a year and a half of your life, and so when you're finally done, it's like, is this the best I can do, or is this a movie that I'm really proud of? And then and then you have the preview process and all of that, and it's a journey.
What's your favorite thing of all about the whole process? And obviously you like to see it finished, but the process itself, what is your favorite part of it? Is it the being on set and directing? What's your favorite part?
Well, I've said it's like when I'm writing, I can't wait to direct. When I'm directing, I can't wait to edit. And when I'm editing, I can't wait to write, because I learn so much about writing and story from editing that's my kind of circular thing. I love all of it for different reasons. I love the camaraderie and the people that I meet on set. I love the grueling hours. I love location. I love all of that. And then that beats you up, and it feels like it's 15 rounds. And then you get into the cutting room, and I've had the same people my editors and post-production people and composer. They've been the same people for 25 years. So they're really good friends, and we have a system, and it becomes 6 people finishing the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 6 months of your time. And then you get to go on the stage where you've got, 45 or 70 different tracks and channels, and the movie comes alive, and then the print is suddenly perfect, and suddenly it's a real movie.
Do you frequently have doubts along the way?
Frequently? You mean like every
2 seconds?
Waking minute of every day?
Yeah. So it's always doubts.
No, of course you do.
And it's all the way up through the first public screening, I assume, and then you either get a sense you've got a problem or you've done your work.
Well, yeah. I mean, some of it is, some of it you just know. Some of the previews can be. I mean, I like the preview process, but it's terribly nerve-wracking. But when we did Hitch, we, for some reason, at the end of the shoot period, I thought for sure I had ruined my career and Will Smith's career.
Really?
I mean, there are stories with that movie about, writing every day, and we had 45 minutes of footage of phone calls and stuff where the editors would call us and say, "So who's Eva talking to?" And we'd say, "We don't know yet." Like, we literally had filmed one side of a phone call, and we didn't know who she was actually having a conversation with. We said, "Well, we'll figure that out later." We had a lot of that kind of stuff going on, and I just didn't know. And I literally went off on a sailing trip with a buddy of mine for a week, just thinking I'm doomed. And my phone didn't work, and I just was, "Stop the world, I want to get off." And a week later, I came back to New York, and I checked my phone, and my editor called and said, or my 2 editors actually, and they said, "You're not going to believe this, but it's really good. It's really funny." And I was like, "Yeah, no way." So I went to go see it, and it was really good. And normally a director's cut is 10 weeks after the editor's assembly, and the editor's cut, you have 10 weeks where you're left alone. The DGA protects you. Nobody can come see it. Nobody can take the film away from you. All those things. And you need those weeks. You need 10 weeks. And on Hitch, we were done in 4.
Wow.
And we're like, we can't be done. This can't be done. And so we went away. I took the whole post-production team to Vegas for the weekend. And then we came back to look at it again, and we were like, "No, we're done. We're done. This is it." And then I called the head of the studio, Amy Pascal, and I begged her. I'm like, "We're done. We have to put this in front of an audience. You can't see this by yourself." And she graciously allowed us to have a preview of it. And no one had seen the film. And we went to Vegas, outside of Vegas, into the suburbs, and we had a screening in a 450 seat AMC movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
And Will flew in and snuck in, and the place went crazy. I mean, it was crazy. And at the end, Amy turned to me and she said, "Don't touch this film. Box it and ship it. You're done." So that one was, one of the, that doesn't happen often.
No.
But
And I assume you didn't touch it. It went out as is.
No, we changed I think one close up, and then we were finished.
That's remarkable. And it was from...
Yeah, it was nuts, because it was the most painful movie I've ever made.
Really?
It's like it's a big funny comedy, but there was no laughing on set.
Really?
It was brutal. It was brutal.
So I don't know why, but in my head I would think it would be a blast with Will Smith and Kevin James, but no.
No. No, not that they weren't great. It's just we were rewriting every day. We were, riffing, and it just was not the way. When we did Sweet Home Alabama, we shot the script. On Hitch, there was a script, and then we just went off of that script, and sometimes I would write all day, and we wouldn't even shoot anything. And I had an entire crew in New York City waiting for pages.
Wow.
There's a lot of pressure.
That's amazing. I did not know that. And when you see the movie,
I don't ever want to do that again.
Yeah, well, but when you see the movie, that doesn't show at all. you don't. Well, you might see it, but I certainly didn't see it that way. It looked like a romp. It looked like it was a blast to do, but it was hard. Well,
Yeah.
that's going back to the old Edmund Gwenn line, isn't it? Dying is easy, but comedy is hard. And
Yes.
and it is hard. I salute you for sticking so long to doing comedies. Even the Kominsky Method is comedy, and you've been doing that for a long time.
Well, but that's different. I mean, honestly, Hitch almost killed me. But the Kominsky Method, I have nothing to do with the writing or anything. That's all Chuck Lorre, and Chuck Lorre is a genius.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know how he does it, but he'll write an episode while sitting in the chair watching me direct, episode 2. He's writing episode 3 in the chair, just, while everyone's around talking and stuff. And he's like, yeah, I just finished episode 3. And it's, it's word perfect. And on that set, you have to, the words are everything. You cannot change a word.
Mm-hmm. It's more like a play.
And yeah, and it works. It works for him. It works for the actors. And that's why he is who he is. But not everybody's Chuck Lorre.
Well, you've clearly worked with bunches of Oscar winners in one way, shape, or form, and those two guys are just about as good as it gets.
Oh, they're brilliant. I mean, I'm so lucky. I did a movie that nobody saw, but it starred Shirley MacLaine and Jessica Lange. And then I went from Shirley MacLaine and Jessica Lange to Michael Douglas and Alan Arkin, and it's just, meaning no disrespect, but old Hollywood. And it was, it's a lost art of these guys are, the men and women are just, they are real legends and real movie stars, and they treat people so well, and they're so kind, and they're so grateful,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just like, wow.
And you even got Anne Margaret in there, too.
And I got Anne Margaret in there, too. I only got to work with her a couple of days. But, yeah, working with Anne Margaret, it was just like, holy,
Do you have to pinch yourself?
Yeah. No, it's pretty cool. Shirley MacLaine's like my mom now. We see each other like every 3 months.
Wow.
She is just a dream of a human being.
So aside...
and so are Michael and Alan. I don't get to see them as often. It's not like I went to the Canary Islands with Alan Arkin and Michael, but I did with Shirley and Jessica Lange.
Oh wow, yeah. So let's talk about stars for just a moment. I don't want to dwell on stars, but they're there and they make life sort of easier for someone to sell a movie.
Get your movie made.
Yeah, get your movie made. What is it about stars? Can you put a finger on what it is about stars that makes them stars?
Mm-hmm.
Is it too individualized?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I know that for me, what I've often said is stars are like thoroughbreds. They're not a farm horse. They're not like any other animal. They do one thing incredibly well. They do it better than anybody. And when they run their race, they are the most beautiful thing in the world to watch.
Mm.
But off the track, it's not like their lives are normal or that they're just it's a different thing. They look like a horse and they act like a horse, but they're not a horse. They're a thoroughbred, and they do one thing really, really well. And it is amazing. It is amazing when you hang out and you go, oh, Reese is so sweet, and I see her up at Pan Quotidian, and she's got her family, and my kids went to school with her kids, and it's all kind of normal. But then you put a camera on her, and she does this thing that very few people can do, and you just watch it. Same thing with Will, same thing with Drew, same thing with Matthew and Kate and Donald Sutherland. All of them. It's a gift.
There's something that's, of course, the old line Hollywood. They called it the it factor. There's something that you can't put your finger on. But I think you've just defined it extremely well. They're thoroughbreds in a race with a bunch of very good horses. And clearly you need the supporting cast as well, and they need to be good as well. But they're frequently not, like you say, they're not stars. They're not the thoroughbred.
Well, it depends. I mean, what I would say is like what I was always surprised at as an actor. You know, you walk into the room and we all have strong egos and you're insecure and stuff. What I didn't really realize until I became a director is that the people on the other side, the people whose room you're walking into, are desperate for you to be good.
Yeah.
They're not there to judge you in some way where you're just like, yeah, you're lousy, get out. They want you to be great. They want you to show them how the material is going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And casting becomes a really interesting. You've just got to trust it, because oftentimes you have people come in and what happens is you begin to doubt the material because people aren't, it's not funny, or it's not, it just sounds awful. And then one person will come in and elevate everything, and suddenly the material works again, and suddenly that is really funny, and that this moment is wonderful, and it's pretty simple when someone walks in and is that person, and it's not that only these 10 people are stars. I think we've learned that also. I mean, I've known it for a while, but I mean, I think when you definitely see it when you watch, Britain's Got Talent, or you see Paul Potts, or you see Susan Boyle,
Susan
or you see people who come on and they're like, well, whatever, and then they open their mouth to sing, and you're like, oh my God, what a talent. And I think that's the same thing. There are an amazing amount of talented actors out there.
Oh, amazing.
That are really, really good.
For sure. Well, I in my day in L.A., which I'm no longer there, obviously, but in my day in L.A., I wrote 90 teleplay episodes, mostly animation, and you work with voiceover actors, which is a whole other breed, and they can take your crummy material and just totally elevate it.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about something at a different level where it's not just the voice. Obviously, it's a face, it's a persona, it's all of that. What advice would you give to actors that come into audition? Is there anything that they can do to have a better chance at getting cast?
Yeah. Well, as hard as as easy as this sounds, it's the most difficult thing to do, and that's be yourself. And that means don't wear your insecurity on your sleeve. Don't push it. Be a professional. I'm not judging you as a person. I'm just looking for someone to say the lines. You know what I mean? And so many people come in, and it's like it's like you want to say, I'm not judging you, the person. This is just a transactional meeting. So take the personal out of it, so you can just be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
Be the actor. I'll be the director. I can't tell you how many times I've cast somebody who they walked in and I thought, well, they're not who I wrote it for, and then they blow me away with what they've done. It's like, yep, that's the perfect person.
So there's no way to define that, though, is there? In other words, for an actor,
no.
they have to be themselves, and they have to put something on it, although I would assume that most of the time you're looking for some kind of uninflected or calm performance of something.
Well, here's the thing. Casting a movie is like casting a dinner party that lasts 6 months. So you not only, there are talented people and talented actors that I wouldn't spend lunch with. and I would rather have someone who is, genuine and kind and is not a diva, and, they may not be the best, the most celebrated, incredible actor ever, and I don't care, because I have to spend 6 months with them on some island in the middle of the Atlantic.
Right.
And that's really what it is. It's not just about the performance. It's about the energy that you bring to the room. If it's manic, manic is fine for a couple of hours, but I can't see you week in and week out, spend 15 hours a day with you, and have you be a pain in the ass at 5 a.m.
Mm-hmm. Have you had that happen? And I'm not asking for names, but you've had that happen.
Oh yeah, of course I have.
So when you have an actor on set, and they're just not, for whatever reason, they've had a bad night. They just didn't read the work that you changed. Do you have a technique for getting them to get where you need them to be?
No, because I don't think there is a technique. Everybody, the minute you think you have it solved, somebody, shows up with some other issue.
So you just work it.
So many times the director has to be. I mean, you just don't know. Are you just the conductor of an orchestra and they all know their parts and they're all brilliant musicians, or is it more like you're the music man with a whole bunch of people who just have been handed instruments that don't know how to play?
Mm-hmm.
You don't know necessarily what the issues are and what they're bringing to the table and how their day was, but you're there to do a job. And, sometimes you're their best friend, sometimes you're their stern father, sometimes you're their lover, sometimes you're their best girlfriend, sometimes sometimes I don't know until you meet somebody what it is.
But
people can just be nervous, people can be tired, hungover, newly divorced, in love, whatever it is. That's part of the high wire act, is that you just don't know.
So would you say?
And you rely on the people that are on set, the people who have to deal with performance. You're dealing with, your camera operator, your DP, your script supervisor, your costume designer, your gaffer. Lots and lots of people are there to kind of help make it good. I've had difficult people, but I've also had just dream people where I'm like, I don't even need to be here.
They just do it.
They just do it.
You're sort of saying what has long been known is that great directors are really great psychologists, that you understand humans and how to work with them.
Yeah, but I also think there's this misnomer of, directors are manipulative jerks and are withhold, all of those kind of weird. It's just it's just not true. I mean, it's about being communicative. It's about communicating an idea.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people love Mike Nichols. He loved actors. They talked. That's why, kind of getting back to the fact, I'm glad I was in theater, because there are a lot of people who are very intimidated by actors because they don't know how they do it. They don't know how they get to a place where they can do some of the things that they do in front of total strangers. And so if you just have a bit of compassion and you have some sense of human nature and intellect and story, and you've written the movie and you know what you need, you do what you can to help them.
Well, yeah, and clearly when you cast great people, it's really, a lot of it's about casting, isn't it? Just purely getting the right people.
Yeah, I mean, once you've cast them, casting is, I don't know who said it, but somebody said, casting is like 80% of the job.
Mm-hmm.
Like, once you have those people, they just come on and they do what they do, and it made you laugh in the room, and 4 months later they walk on set and you're like, oh, hey, all right, I forgot I cast you. Oh, great, you're here. And then they do their thing and they're hilarious.
And so casting is clearly the key. I mean, I've always heard that. I've always understood it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Have you ever, and again, no names are needed, have you ever cast someone and got them to set and they were wrong? No, you don't.
Have I done that?
Again, you don't need to name names.
Yes, I'm sure I have.
And then do you replace them?
I have.
Did you replace them?
Sorry?
Did you replace them?
Have I replaced anybody? No, but I was given the opportunity. I basically called the studio on an actor once, and I was like, I don't know what's happened here. I can't. And I was like, you can see the production report. You should see every take, because this clearly is not working. And they basically said, you can fire him if you want.
Mm-hmm.
We'll redo it. And I didn't. I probably should have. I actually, in retrospect, I should have fired him within the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Because he was rude and insolent and an ass. But I didn't.
Oh God. So, all right, can you think of I'm looking for a way to get out of some issue. So you've had some massive challenge on a set, and I'm sure you've had more than a few, where there was some big challenge, and things just weren't working right. What did you do to get out of it? What kind of inspirational thing can you tell people that you worked your way out of a big problem?
There are moments, and other directors have shared this with me, and it made me feel better, which was there are times when you walk on a set or you're rehearsing a scene and your blood runs cold because it's not working. Where you're like, oh no, it's terrifying because the meter is running. A director lives at the nexus of the fiscal and the creative.
Yeah.
You're responsible for millions and millions of dollars, and in the case of Hitch, was $80 million, or it's a lot of money and a lot of pressure and a lot of time. And when things don't go, like you thought they would, you can become a deer in the headlights. And I learned very early on to say, I don't know. Like, what is the answer? I'm supposed to have all the answers. And I learned very quickly to admit when I didn't know what to do, because the crew knows that you don't know what you're doing.
Sure.
And so what I've done is I've turned to other creative types I've turned to the script supervisor, I've turned to the DP, I've turned to the costume designer, I've turned to, the producers that just, here's the problem, and I don't know, and I've been rescued, probably countless times by other creative people who, it's not just about you. It's not just about the director. It's about all the other creative people that are on set.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're surrounded.
I'll take a good idea from anybody.
That is, I think that's a great hallmark of any great business leader. Any leader is to it's not all on you, that you have a team, and why not take advantage of that team, which you've done. So that's good on you, that you don't feel like you have to solve
it makes the crew relax. It's like I've heard stories of other sets, other directors, other actors, other stuff, and I'm just like, wow, that's just not me. My sets are, they're not a party by any stretch, but they're relaxed,
mm-hmm.
and they're happy. People need to be kind. I have fired people for being rude,
mm-hmm.
and being just, an ass.
What, obviously the job that you've done most of your career is filled with nothing but pressure of one kind or another. Do you have any particular way that you handle pressure? Do you do meditate, or?
Yes.
What is it?
Yes, fine wine.
Do you carry around a bottle on set?
No, I just, I laugh. I tend to work with a lot of the same people. When I did The Secret last fall, about this time, in New Orleans, I took the production designer and the art director from the Kominsky Method, because we just got on like a house on fire, and I lived with those two women in a big house in the Garden District, and it was just really fun. It was fun to have people to talk to, fun to have friends. We'd have barbecues. We would just put music on. And that was at the end of the day. And it's like, for me, it's like, work hard, play hard. And there were times where we just, you got to blow off steam on a Saturday night or whatever.
Right.
But I've never, I had a producer for 13 years, named Wink.
Yeah.
From England, and she always said to people, don't mistake Andy's easygoing nature for that he doesn't expect you to do 100%, at work as hard as he does. And I think as long as you can maintain a sense of fun, because it is fun. It's amazing. To be in the movie business is just the best job in the world.
Sure.
And most of the people that have survived and been there for a long time know that. And that's why, like with going back to Michael Douglas or Alan Arkin. I mean, people, they've done 50, 80 movies. They know you can't be a jerk, and you can't run crazy. You can't come to set hungover. You got to get your sleep. You got to eat right. You got to take care of yourself.
Did you early on have any instances in your own self that you had to learn that from, where you didn't treat somebody well and you had a bad lesson, or did you just always know that?
I once screamed at somebody on the Hitch set when things just went, things had gone pear-shaped, and I was exhausted. I was writing all the time. I was getting maybe 2-3 hours of sleep a night. I thought the movie was going completely off the rails, and I ended up yelling. I ended up yelling at a sound guy, and then I found out later, and we were waiting and whatever, and I found out later that his 10-year-old son was on the set that day,
yeah.
And I just was so ashamed of myself that I called him that night to apologize, and then I asked if I could speak to his son, and I apologized to his son, and I've never forgotten it. I just like that will never and has never happened again.
Well, that's
it's just it was unprofessional. It was just I still feel horrible about it. And we were fine after that, and anyway, but I don't treat people poorly except for that one time. I don't treat people poorly, and I expect people to behave themselves.
I think that's grand, and I think that you've obviously, in being around a long time, you've seen some people come into audition or whatever that you knew for whatever reason were not going to work out because they were going to be like that, and
it's a chemistry test as much as it is a talent audition.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good piece of advice for anybody that goes into audition, that it's a chemistry test, and that in fact people are looking to see if they want to be with you for any period of time.
It is. It's a dinner party.
So
they're fun. Oh, they're interesting. Oh, they listen. Oh, they can tell a good story. Oh, they're present. They're not they're not grossly insecure or manic or those are kind of the things. It's not necessarily that you're looking for that kind of thing. It's just I try to create, and my casting director and I try to create a really comfortable, really warm, embracing room for you to come into. I know you're nervous, and I try to do everything I can to make you not nervous.
Well, those are your collaborators, because you clearly can't make a big movie by yourself. Those are your collaborators.
Right.
And
yep.
Right, so I'm always interested in talking to artists who do collaborate about collaboration. Maybe you've already said it, but is there anything else that you can lend to the notion of what makes good collaborations work?
Well, it's like, my writing partner, Rick Parks, and we often say that it's I didn't write the movie, Rick didn't write the movie. The pair of us, the third person that we create together wrote the movie.
Right.
And it's a little bit of that kind of, Lennon-McCartney thing. It's like together they were the Beatles, but, whether you liked John Lennon stuff or you liked Wings is a whole nother thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we balance each other out. I have that with my composer, not my composer, but the composer, George Fenton, has done every movie I've done.
Right.
He's a dear, dear friend. And he often, when it finally gets to George, I don't give him any direction. I trust him that much to just do the thing that he does. And what's amazing is that it always, his instincts always kind of remind me of what I felt when we wrote it, like the moment in the scene. And it's a really fascinating relationship, music to cinema, and obviously the material, the script to cinema. That's what I love so much about it. Is there's so many other creative facets, whether it's the costume designer who has thought more about the character than you have,
Right.
and what they wear and why they wear it and where they shop and what their socioeconomic realities are, or, you know, all of those kind of things. I find it, you know, true. It's like theater. I mean, it's the community that I covet, because they're all, you know, brilliant in their own right, and collectively we make this film.
Well, you know, there's something to be said, Andy, for the fact that you and people like Clint Eastwood and so on always are surrounded by the same people, movie after movie, and I would say that's a testament to you. So there's something.
Well, it's a bit of chemistry and a bit of a shorthand, and you already know that you love these people, and that when you go on location, it can be really lonely. It can be, you know, you're away from your family, you're working crazy hours. There's an enormous amount of stress. So, you know, to have these people who have your back and actually love you, and you love them, it just creates a safe zone around the process.
Do you, when you're planning a movie, do you know pretty much what you're going to do throughout the whole thing? Obviously, you didn't on Hitch, but do you tend to storyboard, or do you know what you're going to do in advance?
You mean camera-wise?
Yeah, camera-wise. Well, obviously, you've done some kind of location scouting, but do you know what you're going to do visually, day by day, or do you? No, you go in and wing it.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say I wing it. When there are, like on Fool's Gold and some other things, when there are action scenes, those are storyboarded. And the reason they're storyboarded is not because, you know, we've got to hope the director knows what he's doing. It's you storyboard it so that you know what the first unit has to shoot, what, you know, in terms of time management and money and closures of streets and stunts and everything. Everybody, all the other departments need to know exactly what we're doing and who's doing what, where, when, and how. So you have a blue screen, you know, you have a green screen unit, you have a stunt unit, you have a action unit, you have the first unit, and you just break it down so that it's financially feasible, and it's just more, you know, it's time management. So those scenes you do storyboard. I don't storyboard scenes. In fact, I like to, and you know, I've worked with the same DP often, Andrew Dunn. I like to block, and I think this comes from my theater training. I like to block scenes and put them on their feet, and let's figure out what the scene is before I decide what the shots are. And then oftentimes, once the actors are kind of up and running in a scene, and we've got things going on and whatever, then I will find myself standing somewhere on the set looking at it from a point of view, and I'll look over and there's my DP looking at it from another side. And then we start talking about, well, if we do this here and we do this here and we can get this here, we have to get a second camera in here, and we can, you know, and that to me is more organic and part of the process, because you learn, you know, it's always good to have a plan, because it's easier once you have a plan to go into plan B. If you don't have any idea what you want to do, then you can find yourself getting stitched up, and all that really means is that it's eating time off the clock. So yes, you call audibles all the time, but you do have a game plan.
Is there, I don't know the best way to say it, is there something that you know works time and again in terms of shooting comedy so that you get whatever the punchline is? Is there something that you go fall back on every time, or is it always different?
It's always different.
Always different.
Always different, because the scenes are different. I mean, I know from John Blankenship, never move on a joke. You know, I mean, that's pretty much. So
that's you've just taught me something new. I never heard him say that.
Yeah.
Never move on a joke.
Never move on a joke.
Well, he's still teaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was a character.
Yeah.
He really was a character.
And doors are funny.
And
you know, there's a couple things like that.
Doors. Well, that's true, especially if you're doing farce. That's really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Andy, we've been talking for an hour and 5 minutes. I've just been just soaking this in. There are two more questions I need to ask you. One is you've spent a long time working with a lot of people. Can you tell us a particular story that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, oddball, or just plain funny?
Well, I don't know if it's funny, but it's interesting.
Okay,
I think, and weird and oddball.
We'll take it.
When I did Hitch, there is a scene in Hitch that became rather famous, where Will Smith walks Kevin James to the door.
Yes.
And teaches him how to walk a girl to the door and kiss her goodnight. And there's a whole thing there. That scene I wrote that day, all day. That scene was originally about 3 lines long, and then we had a company move to another place in New York, in the city. And the scene was basically, he says something about the paper and his pictures in the paper, and what is this? He goes, it's a little bit about me being me or something, and Will has a line, no, that's a little bit of you doing something I don't ever want to see again. And that was the scene. That's the end of the scene.
Right.
And Will, when we got there in the morning, it was down it was some street in the West Village. He goes, this is a great street. Why are we only shooting like four eighths of a page? I was like, well, I don't know. What do you want to do? And so we start talking, and Kevin comes and joins the party, and we're looking at all the brownstones, and we're like, this is a great street. We should do something. And we start riffing on walking a girl to the door, especially if you have to walk up all those stairs. And then we got to the 90-10, which is something that Will had come up with or had been told once, and so we start talking about that. And then so we talk, and then we go, okay, well, let me try and write a scene. So I go off and write a scene while the whole crew is waiting, bring it to Will an hour or so later, and he likes a few of the lines and a few of the things. I go back, I write it again. Anyway, around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we still haven't shot a word. And we finally, come out and I show the scene. It's a 5-page scene. Now, normally you shoot like 2 or 3 pages a day, and so this is 5 pages, and so he finally says, okay, we're going to do it, but it's now 4 o'clock, and so he and Kevin rehearse it. We have 3 cameras going, and we shoot the scene in 2.5 hours, 5 pages in 2.5 hours.
Wow.
And it ends up being like one of the best scenes in the movie, but it was not written. And the other thing that was kind of fun about it is that actual door, we didn't have permission from the location managers because we weren't planning to shoot that day. So Will and I walked up to the door of that brownstone and knocked on the door to see if the owners would let us shoot there.
Yeah.
And Sarah Jessica Parker opened the door. It was her house.
Oh, my goodness.
And so she said, yeah, sure. And I talked to Sarah Jessica Parker like years and years later. And she goes, when Matthew and I see that movie that comes on and our door comes on, we're like, remember when? I mean, they're very proud it's their door.
Okay, that's completely bizarre. So you walk up with Will Smith. If you walk up to a house with Will Smith and you open the door, the people inside typically would be flipped out. But you walk up and it's Sarah Jessica Parker. So
not only that, it was Sarah Jessica Parker, and she looked at me after she had said hi to Will. She looked at me and she goes, wait, I know you. And I said, yes, you and I went out to dinner in Australia 10 years ago. And I literally was in Australia with a buddy of mine, and we apparently we ended up checking into the same hotel at the same time. And my friend worked at Fox at the time, and he introduced himself, and she was like, what are you guys doing? And so we all went out to dinner in Sydney, Australia. It's crazy.
That's a completely crazy story, because how would you ever expect to open the door to someone else who is a celebrity? it's
Yes.
not possible.
Well, I guess it happens in New York.
I guess it does. Okay, last question of the day, Andy. Do you have a solid piece of advice or a really good tip? Not that we haven't heard tons of them so far, but do you have a solid piece of advice or a tip for someone who's starting out in the business, or maybe someone who's in a little bit and trying to get to the next level?
I do. I have a good piece of advice which I have given several times. My feeling is that because LA is so spread out and it's very difficult to network, my advice is, I've even given this advice to my own daughter, go to Sundance. Go to the Sundance Film Festival. Volunteer and get into one of those programs, and I say Sundance because it's younger than, say, the Toronto Film Festival or any of the other festivals.
Mm-hmm.
But at Sundance, I've gone, when I was just starting out, I went several times. But the great thing about Sundance is everyone is very welcoming. Everybody is having a good time. Movie stars are hanging out. Agents are hanging out. Other writers are hanging out. Wannabe directors are hanging out. Everybody is there, all loving film and loving the business. And you can come home, if you go to Sundance for those 2 weeks and you go to the movies and you have a good time and you meet people, the truth is you can come back from 2 weeks in Sundance and have 50 new friends that you never would have met anywhere else. There's no way you would have met them in LA,
Mm-hmm.
and it would have taken you 3 years to meet that many people. So that, to me, is one of the things that really helped. I met a lot of people up there that were fellow writers and fellow, early directors and early producers and early, young executives. And you kind of network at your level and let that level rise. It's not like someone who's 19, the classic story of someone who's just out of college who meets the CEO of 20th Century Fox and suddenly they have a career. It's that 22-year-old meets another 22-year-old who's an intern at that studio who also wants to be a producer, who's never done anything else. And you guys start to form a friendship and a bond, and you start to work on things together. And 20 years later, they're running a studio, and you have a career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's there. It is a business of people who know people, is it not?
Yeah.
It's not a business of talent. It's a business of people who know people that want your talent.
Well, but it's also, you got to remember, I think this is one of the big mistakes people make, is that it can't always be that you walk around going, what can you do for me?
Mm-hmm.
Because the biggest mistake that people make is that it's got to be what are you bringing to the party for them? And oftentimes it's not. I met people when I first got my deal at Paramount. The one thing I could do, I was an okay writer, but I could play golf, I could play tennis, I was fun, I knew my wines, and I started socializing with people and had no other agenda than, oh, this will be fun. And that's part of it too. It can't just be, oh great, I met someone playing tennis and now I'm going to call them up and weasel my way into a job. It just doesn't work that way.
No, it is definitely a business of making those connections between people in a career, and you obviously you did the right things, and I think that's very valuable advice in terms of going to a film festival like Sundance or anywhere where you can meet people en masse. It is difficult.
But you also
otherwise.
have to have a life. You
Indeed.
can't just be somebody out there, shilling. You gotta live your life on the way to wherever it is you're going.
Well, how else would you learn human behavior if you don't live your life? So yeah, I think
Right.
right. And that is something that you've mastered is the art of human behavior, because that's what sells. And it's not special effects, as we talked about. It is people in conflict with characters in conflict with other characters, and that
Right.
you only learn by living your life. That's truly valuable. Andy, this has been a great joy for me to spend a little bit of time with you on the StoryBeat, And I thank you greatly for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you, Steve. It was fun to talk to you.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great episodes to you. This podcast would not have been possible without the generous support of the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.